Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am sharing with you guys 7 looks as well as my review and thoughts on the new Tati Beauty Textured Neutrals palette. So excited about today's video. I was so excited about this palette. I've talked about it on my channel a little bit recently, how I'm a huge fan of Tati. I've been a fan of hers for a long time, and I think a lot of us have been very curious when she would finally come out with a makeup line. So I know there's a lot of excitement surrounding this palette. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys 7 looks that I created using every shade inside the palette, as well as my thoughts and review on this palette. I'll show you guys some swatches, talk to you guys about the different finishes in here, what I love about it, what I maybe don't love about it so much, who I think it would be for, and who I think maybe should skip over this one. So I hope that you guys are excited about this one. We are going to jump right into these 7 looks first. I will include my review at the end of the video. Before we get into it though, I want to welcome any of you that are new here. I hope that you will consider subscribing, hit that notification bell if you'd like to be notified every time I upload a video. And that is it. Let's get into look number 1. All right, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed those 7 looks. Please let me know which one was your favorite. I always love hearing which ones you guys like the very most. Now let's jump into my thoughts on this palette in general, starting with some details. This palette retails for $48 on TatiBeauty.com. There is a $5.95 shipping charge as well, so that puts it around $54. The palette includes a very interesting setup and color story. We have 6 different color stories, and within those there are 4 different finishes. I think this was a brilliant way to set up a palette, a very unique way of setting up a palette and very organized. I also like the idea that this pushes us to think more about texture than specifically just about color. I think sometimes when we look at an eyeshadow palette, we can be focusing in on what the colors are, and sometimes we don't think about the variety that just having a different texture can give to your eye look. And I think that's a very kind of unique and smart way to get the consumer to think about eyeshadows in general. This, of course, is a neutral palette. I do think it is a little bit on the warm side of neutral, so if you are not into warm eyeshadows, I'm not sure you'll love this one because I think a lot of these shadows lean just a little bit warm. The packaging of the palette is absolutely lovely. I think the size of this, for being a larger palette, is still manageable. I don't think it's extremely large. I wanted to show you guys just a classic Morphe palette. That's how it compares to a Morphe palette, and I've heard some people say this reminds them of a Morphe palette. The feel of this is significantly more luxurious than a Morphe palette. I love the matte finish. It's very sturdy feeling. You've probably heard about the amazing full-size mirror inside here, which is very dirty right now, but I really love the look and feel of this packaging. So I'm sure you guys have seen this palette all over the internet, but just to show you guys, this is kind of how it's set up. We have the rows being the different finishes and the columns being the different color stories. So to review this palette for you guys, I want to review both the finishes and also the different color stories, kind of divided out in that way. And I'll also be including swatches of each row and then also of each column. So let's start off with the bottom row, the mattes. Had no problem with the mattes in here. They were a beautiful formula. I really expected them to be. I know Tati has very high standards when it comes to her eyeshadow formulas, and these were fantastic. Easy to blend, great pigment, a little bit powdery, but I find that most really good high-end shadows that are very pigmented are. So just keep in mind you need the tiniest bit on your brush to get really nice color payoff. The next row in here is the one that I think is the most unique. This is the sequin row, and this is a very interesting formula. These are basically a matte eyeshadow that has quite a bit of very tiny micro glitters inside of it. I'm sure that we're all familiar with matte eyeshadows that have a little bit of glitter in them. I personally am typically annoyed by those shades, but these are a little bit different than those because there is actually quite a bit of glitter in these, but it's super tiny flecks of glitter. I feel like I need a little bit more time with this formula to figure out the best way to use it, because basically what happens with this type of a shade, if you use it like a matte shadow and maybe put this in your outer corner or buff it into your crease, if you overwork with these shadows, that glitter is going to kind of buff away, which number one is going to not give you the effect that it has the potential of giving you, but also can create a little bit of fallout. So I think it's a formula that you have to be very cautious of how you apply it. I don't want to say that I don't like this formula yet. I need more time to work with this and play with this to really get to know it a little bit better. The next row up is the metallics row. This is a beautiful metallic shadow formula. It's a very refined metallic, which I think is a little bit more of a universally friendly metallic. It's not overly reflective or intense to where it's going to emphasize texture for people that are maybe concerned about that. I feel like this is a really good metallic formula for someone that maybe has more fine lines on their eyes, or maybe someone that has a little bit more mature eyelids that have issues with shadows emphasizing lines or texture on their eyes. This is a really nice, soft, lovely formula to work with. It applied perfectly with a finger. I thought it applied really well with a brush as well, and I think the color setup is really lovely. I really love the different shimmer colors in here. I feel like you're kind of covered for all the basics. Now for the glitter row. This is the row I think the most nervous about trying, about reviewing, because I know that I am not typically someone that wears a lot of glitter or likes a lot of glitter. So I had some reservations about this glitter formula. I will say after working with it, they're relatively easy to work with considering that they're glitter. I feel like the base that they're sitting in holds together a little bit better than say like the ColourPop glitters. But that said, you guys, they are still definitely messy. You want to make sure that you are just aware of not just when you're using these glitters, but when you're using the entire palette in general. So you can probably see as I shift this around that I have flecks of glitter kind of scattered throughout the palette, and there's a good chance, especially if you use your fingers to apply your eyeshadow, which I often do, that glitter might end up on your face. So you want to be very careful and cautious of how you use this palette, not just when you're using the glitters, but even when you're using these other shades here. Be careful of where you're holding it. For example, there were times that I would grab it like up here and then I'd get a chunk of glitter on my hand, and then when I would go to wipe my hair away from my face, I'd have a streak of glitter. And that's just a small example of how not really thinking about the glitter can cause issues even when you're not actually using the glitter. So that's just something you have to kind of be aware of and be very careful about. I would recommend doing your eyes first, which I typically don't like to do, but I think in this case it really is almost a necessity. But that said, you guys, some of my favorite looks that I created were those glitter looks. I am not someone that wears glitter very often. I just feel like my lifestyle, the phase of life that I am in, doesn't really warrant me wearing glitter very often. However, you best believe I'm very excited for Christmas and New Year's to break out those glitters and have an excuse to wear them because I think they are absolutely stunning. So while we're on the subject of glitter, the only thing I have to compare these glitters to are my ColourPop glitters. So I wanted to give a swatch for you guys of, let's go with this glitter right here. This is the Sweet Talk palette by ColourPop. You can definitely feel a difference. This one's drier. It's a little bit more kind of flaky where it kind of falls around. Whereas let's go in with this middle shade right here. This one has a little bit more of like a wet feeling to it. It feels like it has, I'm not sure what it is, almost like an oil or something that holds it all together. I'm sure it's not an oil, but you can see that it sticks to my skin a little bit better. And that's definitely a good thing when it comes to working with glitter. But that said, you guys, you're still going to get some fallout. You still need to be careful with the glitters. Now jumping into the color stories or the columns, starting with the blacks. This is the memory column. I think these are perfectly done blacks or charcoals. I mean, each of these formulas I think are really, really nice. If you like that very smoky kind of New Year's Eve kind of look, this is perfectly going to give you that. In all honesty, I will tell you guys, these are not the type of shades I reach for very often. You probably know if you watch my other videos that even when I line my eyes, I typically use a pencil and I also typically use brown. I still think they're nice to have, especially if you are looking for basics, because I know a lot of people rely on a black either for liner or to smoke things out. I see a reason for why this column is in here. It's just not one that I personally will probably get a lot of use out of. The next column is the ritual column, the dark brown column. This is a perfectly done matte brown. It actually goes on the eyes and builds on the eyes even deeper than it looks, which I absolutely love. Again, the matte formula was so easy to work with. I just think this is such a good essential shade to have. As for the sequin version of this one, I wanted to kind of show you guys these two swatched next to each other. You'll see that the base of the standard matte is a little bit deeper than the sequin version. They're both stunning. I actually think you could use both of them to smoke out your lash line. You just want to be careful if you're using this one, as if it's a matte that you're going to probably get a little bit of glitter fallout, so just be aware of that. Loved the metallic shade in this one. It's kind of a rosy bronze, which I think is really, really beautiful. And then of course the glitter in there was really beautiful as well. Moving on to the story column. These are your oranges. These are beautiful oranges. This is a good, true, rusty kind of orange. So I think if you don't like warm shadows, this is the row that maybe would scare you away from this palette. Not the most unique orange, but I understand that these shadows aren't necessarily, because they're neutrals, they're not really meant to be unique. They're meant to be staples. And I personally do consider an orange to be kind of a staple, but I know that some people are a little bit scared of orange, so just be aware of that. I do think that these two colors are pretty much identical once you take the glitter out of this one. So if you were to actually use this shade more as a matte and kind of to put into your outer crease or into your transition area, it's basically going to end up looking a lot like this one, because the more you work with this sequin row right here, if you work or manipulate it a lot, you're going to lose a lot of that glitter, which basically ends up making it look just like the row below it. So again, I'm very curious to keep playing with this row and figure out the best way to use it to get the most out of the shimmer that is inside of there. This metallic right here is the most beautiful kind of peachy gold. It's so pretty on the lids. One of my favorite metallics in this entire palette. And then I think this might have been one of my favorite glitters as well. I just love the warmth of this glitter. Moving on to the Soothe row. This is kind of like your staples. You have your transition shade here, which is such a perfectly done transition shade. Loved this bronze right here. Such a good classic kind of golden bronze. Perfect for the center part of your lid if you're doing a halo eye, or the inner part of your lid if you're wanting to add some brightness. And again, I think it's one of those shades that would look good on absolutely anybody. Now moving on to the Aura row. This row kind of surprised me and actually scared me a little bit when I first opened the palette and swatched this shade. I thought it was going to be a little bit too sort of pink or peach toned for my skin tone, but as I used it, it adds such a nice brightness to your eyes, which kind of makes sense to me because a lot of under eye concealers that maybe are meant to like brighten up your eyes usually have a bit of a pink or a peach tone to them. So I actually found this worked really well for me. It even worked under my brow bone. I was worried it would be a little bit too pink or a little bit too dark. I think if you have very fair skin, this might be a little bit too dark for you, but generally speaking, I think this would work for a lot of different skin tones to kind of add some brightness or to highlight underneath the brow bone. I of course love a good champagne, and this is just a really good basic champagne, which I think every palette needs some version of a basic champagne. And I do want to comment on this glitter right here. These look very similar to each other, but this one's basically just kind of like a cool toned sort of silvery brown glitter, whereas this one is a very multi-dimension colored glitter. You have so many colors inside of here. You have pink, yellow, gold. I see some green and blue. It's beautiful on the eyes. Last up, let's move on to the Poet row. These are kind of our cranberries, our kind of warm pinks. These are very beautiful, but they have quite a bit of pink pigment in them. If you are afraid of pink eyeshadow, just be aware that you're going to get quite a bit of pink undertone in these shades right here. If you are intimidated by a little bit of pink, I will say this, I think that using these in your like crease or even on your lid, if you top them with something like this Ritual shade right here, it's going to tone down some of that pink color and give you a little bit more of like a burgundy shift to it, which is usually how I prefer to use this type of a color. I like a little bit more kind of brown to it. I love the blue reflect of this color right here. I love this pink right here. This is just a very pretty classic kind of, it actually has a little bit more subtle of a shift to it than it looks in the pan. And I think this glitter as well might have been one of my favorite glitters. Glitter's very fun and feminine, and something about a pink glitter just feels very fitting to me. I just really enjoyed the look that I created with that glitter. I thought it was really, really stunning. So now I want to get into the pros and who I think this palette would be a good fit for. So the things I loved about the palette, I love the packaging, I love the mirror inside. I mean, everybody's been talking about that mirror, but it really is beautiful. I think this palette makes a great addition to other palettes inside your collection. So maybe if you have some slightly more colorful palettes or creative palettes, I feel like this is a good staple palette to pull in with that palette just to give it a lot of versatility. The glitters can add variety, the mattes can add dimension. That said, I also think that this is a really good standalone palette if you're just someone that doesn't have a lot of makeup or doesn't have a lot of palettes. If you like neutrals, I think that you'll like this palette. Just be aware that you're going to be working with some glitter, and glitter can be a little bit tricky to work with, not just in the actual glitter shades, but also in the sequin row right here. I think there's a bit of a learning curve with those, so just be aware of that, be prepared for that. The colors in here are lovely. I think they're very beautiful neutrals. If you like a warmer neutral as well as some charcoal shades, I think this would be perfect for you. The formulas in here didn't disappoint. I didn't expect that they would. As for some potential cons or things I think some people might not like about this palette, obviously first and foremost is going to be the glitter. If you absolutely know that you do not like glitter, do not wear glitter, do not want to bother or mess or hassle with using glitter at all, I really don't know that this is going to be the palette for you, because even if you don't use these glitters, they're going to probably make their way into some of the other shadows or onto your hand or onto your fingers. But it's just something you've got to be aware of when you use this palette. I also think if you are someone that's just into basic mattes and basic shimmers, if you have a relatively large eyeshadow palette collection, I don't necessarily think that these are the most unique shades, which I'm okay with because I know the purpose of these is to be kind of staples and to be neutrals. But if you're looking for something very unique and you don't like the glitter in here, I just think that there's a good chance you might own a lot of these shades in other palettes that you already have or something similar to them. The last thing I think to keep in mind, if you are someone that is not into warm tones, I think the majority of these shadows lean pretty warm with the exception of this very, very dark column right here. I personally love my warm tones, but if you are someone that only likes your cool tones, I think there's a whole lot of this palette that you probably would not get a lot of use out of. I really enjoyed playing with this palette. It was a fun and creative process in a different way. I've never had to really think about textures in the way that I did with this palette, which I think was kind of the point. So I think that's definitely one of the pros of this palette. Personally, I'm very excited about this palette. When I initially got it, I wasn't sure that I would be because I was a little bit afraid of all the glitter that I saw, but after using it, I was really pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed the looks that I came up with. And I think the biggest thing is to be aware of is just handling. Like handling this palette and working with this palette takes a little bit more care, but if you take that care, I think that you can get some really beautiful looks out of this. So that is it for my thoughts on the Tati Beauty Textured Neutrals palette. Let me know down below if any of you guys have picked up this palette, if you are enjoying it, what your thoughts are on it. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. I hope that this video was helpful or interesting for you guys, and that is it for today. I hope that you guys have a great one. I hope that you'll consider subscribing before you leave, and I will see all of you in my next video. Bye. Someone just flushed the toilet. Come on, kids. You might hear a lot of ambient noise because there are a lot of people upstairs today, which means I'm in my basement. All of the plumbing pipes are above me. A lot of toilet flushing going on. Hot water heater is running. Apologize in advance. Make it be its best self. No, that was dumb. A little bit more old, like me.